Hi, welcome back to MOAB, Making Music on a Budget. In the last video we were looking at creating lyrics, and we were looking at all kinds of different types of lyrics and what could be the inspiration for writing lyrics. What we really didn't touch on, I later realized, was how to do it, basically. So that's what we're going to do in this installment. So let's go. Are you ready? I was hoping for a yes. Thank you for joining me again to the second installment of Where to Begin, Fundamentals of Music Making. This time we're going to continue talking about creating lyrics. So we're going to use some examples, and hopefully you can use these as a template or as inspiration for your own lyrics. I am not going to use famous lyrics because I didn't write them, and I cannot speak to why people chose this word or what their real intention was. I'm going to look at lyrics I created over a very long period of time, almost I think 30 or 35 years. And I can tell from your face that you might be asking yourself, why should I care about this honorary member of the OF club, right? There's a playlist up here so you can check whether you approve of my lyrical stylings. Also, by the way, I will take a hate watch. Some of my most favorite creations came from listening to something or watching something and saying, this is the most pathetic bullshit I've ever heard. Okay, let's start with a simple one. In my first video, I said that 99% of all lyrics are potentially fueled by emotions. Describing something you have experienced, like, the beauty of nature, or going to a big city for the first time, or visiting, ruins, the eerie remains of a civilization that has been gone for thousands of years. Usually has such a big impact that it's very easy to write about it. So what I propose as one exercise is actually to describe what you want to describe, but then to look at specific words like a noun or a verb, or an adjective, and then say, how can I make it a bit more interesting by, for example, exchanging it with something that comes a bit more out of left field, right? Because, for example, what association do I have when I look at this word alone? Let me give you an example. This is the verse from a song I wrote many, many decades ago. And the setting is basically stepping out onto the porch of a vacation home on the Irish coast, looking out onto Clare Island, if you've been there, of a summer evening, right? So I was listening to the surf coming in, very loud, but also hearing the voices of the people I loved in the house. Let's just take a listen. I'm going to put the lyrics on the screen too. You will see that I did exchange some of the words with more interesting ones, but more, I would say, not as common ones in this setting. And also I was going for a maritime theme in some of the descriptions. Well, let's just take a listen.
I stepped outside at night, the surf was like a freight train. As I was standing on the patio, and all the while from inside I heard their laughter, and I felt so whole. Flocks of birds lost in time, as happy as a clam was I.
Moving on to the next example, we're going to look at idioms and sayings and turns of phrase and wordplays and puns. You may remember in the first video I said, if you just go for a very commonplace saying, you run the risk of being the first or 100th or millionth person to reuse the same kind of saying, as a song title, which is, I think, boring, and it really won't help unless you're a very good songwriter or a phenomenal singer. So basically, try to subvert the original meaning of the saying or the pun or the turn of phrase to surprise people. Let me start with a very, very, very old example. This song is called Iron Man and is potentially 35 years old. I'm not quite sure. But as you can already guess, it's about somebody who is a stay-at-home dad, right? So he's ironing all the time behind his ironing board. Of course, a bit cheesy, but it was one of my first songs, right? So don't judge me. The next example is just slightly more sophisticated, and it's about being in a torrid love affair with somebody you are afraid is just viewing the whole thing as a fling, whereas you want it to go on. It's called bedtime story.
But she says we're just a bedtime story. She tries to send me off to sleep. She says it's just at nighttime that we're oh so close and in so deep. She says we don't know the least thing. Now that the night is all but past, tucks me in.
In this final example of this type of lyric, I was taking a negative word, like a pejorative, like a slang word, and brought it back to its original meaning. The song is called Crybaby, and I was just describing what I was facing as a parent of a literal baby.
When I hear you cry, baby, wanna hear you sigh, baby, baby, when I hear you scream, lady.
By the way, one of the lights just went out, and I had this happening before, and I had to replace the whole side of the video with some editing magic to not have to redo the whole video again. Moving on to another lyrical device, contrasting two points of view or two opinions about the same thing. For example, Hey Joe would be one of those songs, right? So from the first person, but then from somebody else talking to him about it or asking him about whether he shot somebody. So this is another old song of mine that I'm actually planning to punch up and to re-release. It's about two lovers being caught in a vicious cycle. Let's listen in for a second.
The battle's open now. I can't forgive myself. You aren't stronger where I fail. I want to make you bleed because you've seen me through, and I can better see through you. You call me a hypocrite, I call you immature, and we both know it's all ourselves.
So the exercise here would be to not just write a love song or a song, accusing a former lover of being mean to you, but try to take it from two different viewpoints and to maybe, include another way to interpret the situation. Next up is using dreamlike imagery as a framework for your lyrics. This is a song that is based on a dream that my wife had about the Grim Reaper with a golden scythe and a lost soul standing in a meadow. And I basically just wrote it down as it was, and it already worked, right? I didn't have to do any work. Well, let's take a short listen here.
A blade of golden bone, you saw it in a dream. A shadow all alone in a patch of grass and green.
So the exercise here would be to have a dream journal, right? To just write down your dreams and really try to retell them without wanting to tell a story. Just tell what you dreamt. Don't try to shape it into something that makes sense or supports your message or whatever you want to do. Let's look at one last song. In this example, I used a technique called Verfremdung in German. Verfremdung means that you're using a real incident, but you are looking at it through the lens of a totally different setting. A couple of years ago, I almost went blind in one eye, and while I was laying on the couch of a kind stranger in a very faraway city, waiting for the surgery, at night, I asked myself, as I often do, how can I turn this into a song to not let a perfectly terrible experience go to waste?
What if I lost sight of you? Would I be blinded, left wandering on the path that I knew? What if I lost sight of you? Would I be blinded, left wandering?
So the very mundane setting for this final example was me sitting in an ICU next to a hospital bed at night, looking at the screens and the cables and the wiring and the night sky. out of the window and just basically role-playing that this was a spaceship and we were on a magical journey through the stars.
Alone in your bed, just over King Code Red. Do you see stars passing outside your window?
So coming back to the original question, where to begin when creating lyrics? For me, it's all about emotion. You know, identify the emotion, come up with a word or a turn of phrase, and then play around with it as though it was putty, you know, in your hand. Subverting the meaning, exchanging words, associating, contrasting viewpoints, and so on and so forth. Give it time to mature. So that's it from me. You know, the good news is that the sky is the limit when it comes to using words, because there is no licensing fee on them yet, right? As of now. In one of the upcoming videos, we're going to touch on the concept of failure, you know, when it comes to making music, and that's going to be a fun one. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you next time when we're going to make some more music on a budget. MOAB.